Hello everyone and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Margaret Crowfeather, and I've been a park ranger for 20 years. People always ask about my name. It's Cherokee, means pearl of the dark bird. My grandmother picked it, said it would protect me from dark things. I wish that had been true. This happened in February 1985 during the worst winter West Virginia had seen in 50 years. I was working the Dolly Sods area of Monongahela National Forest, way up in the mountains where the trees grow twisted from the wind and the cold cuts through your bones like a knife. I'd been a medic in the Army before this job, seen plenty of bad things. But nothing, and I mean nothing, had prepared me for what I found in Colewood. The call came in around 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Emergency beacon from a group of cross-country skiers, 5 of them, caught in an avalanche near the old Coal Town ruins. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio static. "Margaret, we've got a code red situation up at Colewood. Avalanche took out a skiing party this morning. Weather's getting worse. You need to get up there before the next storm hits." I knew Colewood. Every ranger in the area knew about it, though most of us had never been there. It was one of those places that gave you the creeps just thinking about it. A company mining town from the 1940s that got snowed in during the winter of 1950. By the time rescue crews reached them in spring, 37 people had died of starvation. The survivors, well, they'd done things to stay alive that people don't like to talk about. The town was officially abandoned after that. Too remote, too dangerous, too full of bad memories. Now it was just a collection of half-buried buildings under 40 years of snow and ice. I loaded my snowmobile with emergency supplies, medical kit, blankets, food, flares, rope. The temperature was dropping fast, already 15 below zero with the wind chill. My breath came out in white puffs that froze in my beard before I could wipe it away. The ride to Colewood took 3 hours through terrain that would challenge a mountain goat. The old mining road was buried under 6 feet of snow, marked only by rusted posts sticking up like tombstones. My headlight cut through the gray afternoon, showing nothing but white drifts and black trees. As I got closer to the town, something felt wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. The forest was too quiet. No bird calls, no squirrel chatter, not even the whisper of wind through the pines. Just dead silence that seemed to swallow up the sound of my engine. I found their camp about a quarter mile from the first buried buildings. 5 tents, all empty but still standing. Their equipment was scattered around, skis stuck up out of the snow, backpacks hanging from tree branches like they'd been thrown there. But no bodies, no blood, no signs of the avalanche that was supposed to have caught them. That's when I noticed the drag marks, 5 sets of them, leading from the campsite toward the ruins. Not the random scrapes you'd expect from an avalanche, but deliberate tracks like someone had pulled the skiers away while they were unconscious. The marks were deep and even, made by something with serious strength. I followed the tracks with my flashlight, my heart starting to beat faster. 20 years of ranger work teaches you to read signs, and these signs were all wrong. The drag marks led straight to the biggest building in Colewood, what used to be the mine supervisor's house, a 2-story place that still had most of its roof. The front door was standing wide open. Snow had blown inside, but I could see footprints in the white powder on the floor. Recent ones. "Hello?" I called out. "This is Park Ranger Crowfeather. Is anyone in there?" My voice echoed back from the empty room. But there was something else, too. A sound like chewing. Slow, wet chewing coming from somewhere deeper in the house. I pulled out my service pistol and stepped inside. The smell hit me. First, sweet and rotten, like meat that had been left out in the sun. But this was February, 30 below zero. Nothing should smell like that in this cold. I moved through the front room, past an old stone fireplace filled with fresh ashes. Someone had been burning something recently. The chewing sound was getting louder, coming from what looked like the kitchen. I reached the doorway and shone my light inside. What I saw there changed my life forever. The kitchen looked like a butcher shop from hell. 5 sets of winter clothes hung from hooks on the walls. Parkas, snow pants, boots, all neatly arranged like the people wearing them had just stepped out of them. But it was what hung next to the clothes that made my blood freeze. Meat. Human meat, cut into strips and hanging from the ceiling like jerky. Arms, legs, chunks of torso, all pale white in the cold air, some with frost crystals forming on the surface. The chewing sound was coming from the corner. I swung my flashlight around and saw him. He was sitting on the floor, hunched over something in his lap. Tall guy, maybe 40 years old, wearing just his underwear despite the cold. His skin was gray-white like old snow, and his back was covered with strange dark marks that looked almost like bruises. "Sir?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sir, I'm here to help." He looked up at me, and I almost screamed. His face was gaunt, cheekbones sticking out sharp as knives. His lips and chin were stained red with blood, and when he smiled, I saw that his teeth had grown longer and sharper than any human teeth should be. But it was his eyes that really got to me. They were completely black, not just the pupils, but the whole eye, like someone had filled them with oil. "Ranger," he said, and his voice sounded wrong too, deeper than it should be and scratchy like he hadn't used it in years. "You're just in time for or dinner." He held up what he'd been chewing on. It was a human hand, fingers gnawed down to the bone. I raised my gun. "Put that down and step away. Now." He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, Margaret, you don't understand yet. You can't stop this. None of us could stop it." How did he know my name? I hadn't told him my name. "The hunger," he continued, getting to his feet. He was taller than I'd thought. Had to be at least 7 feet, but thin as a scarecrow. "It starts small, just a little growl in your belly, but then it grows and grows, until it's all you can think about." "What happened to your friends?" I demanded. "Where are the other skiers?" His black eyes glittered. "Oh, they're around. Some of them are hanging up there." He pointed to the meat drying from the ceiling. "The rest, well, they're changing, just like I did, just like you will." "I'm not changing into anything," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I noticed something strange. The cold that had been biting at my fingers and toes was gone. In fact, I was starting to feel warm, too warm. Sweat was beading up under my winter jacket. "The hunger is calling to you already," the man said, taking a step closer. "I can see it in your eyes." "When did you last eat, Margaret?" "Really eat?" Come to think of it, I hadn't eaten since breakfast. A piece of toast and some coffee, 12 hours ago. And suddenly I was starving. Not just hungry, but ravenous in a way I'd never felt before. My stomach cramped so hard I almost doubled over. "That's it," he whispered. "Feel it growing. The beautiful hunger that never ends." I forced myself to focus. "What's your name?" "Dave Morrison. At least that's what I used to be called. Now I'm something else. Something better." Morrison. I remembered the name from the missing persons report. A lawyer from Charleston leading a skiing expedition with his hiking club. "Dave, listen to me. You're sick. Hypothermia can cause hallucinations, make you do things you wouldn't normally do. I can get you help." "Help?" He laughed again. "This is help. For the first time in my life, I know exactly what I need, exactly what I want." His tongue flicked out to lick the blood from his lips. "And there's so much of it here." The hunger in my stomach twisted like a living thing. The smell of the hanging meat was making my mouth water, and that terrified me more than anything else. I was a vegetarian, had been for 10 years. The sight of raw meat usually made me sick. So why was I suddenly craving it? "The others who lived here before us figured it out," Dave said, moving closer. I kept my gun trained on him, but my hands were shaking. "Back in 1950, they were trapped here just like we were, starving in the cold and dark. And when they finally gave in, when they finally tasted human flesh, they learned the truth." What truth? That we're not meant to eat plants and animals. We're meant to eat each other. That's why human meat tastes so much better than anything else. Why it fills you up in a way that regular food never can. This was crazy talk, but the hunger in my gut was getting worse. I felt dizzy, weak. When was the last time I'd eaten anything substantial? Yesterday, the day before? They're still here, you know, Dave continued. The ones from 1950. They never left Colewood. Why would they? This place gives them everything they need. Travelers who get lost, hikers who come looking for adventure. Every few months, fresh meat walks right up to their door. I heard something then. Footsteps creaking on the floorboards upstairs. Slow, heavy steps, like someone was walking around up there. Dave smiled. Sounds like the others are waking up. They sleep most of the time now, conserve their energy. But when fresh food arrives, he licked his lips again. They get very excited. The footsteps were moving toward the stairs. More than one person, maybe 4 or 5 different sets of feet. Dave, we need to get out of here, right now. Oh no, Margaret. You don't understand. There's nowhere to go. The storm that's coming will bury this whole valley for weeks. No rescue, no escape, just us and the beautiful hunger. My radio crackled with static. I grabbed it with my free hand, never taking my eyes off Dave. Base, this is Crowfeather. I need immediate backup at Colewood. Multiple casualties, possible survivor in need of medical attention. Nothing but static came back. Dave tilted his head. Radio won't work here. Something about the mountains, the minerals in the rock. We're all alone, Margaret. Just like it's supposed to be. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. I could see shadows moving in the hallway above, shapes that didn't look quite human. Last chance, Dave. Come with me now and I can get you help. The only help I need, he said, is hanging right behind you. I turned to look and saw one more piece of meat I'd missed before. Smaller than the others, wearing a child's snow jacket. My stomach lurched, but not with revulsion like it should have, with hunger. That's when I knew Dave was right about one thing. Something was very, very wrong with me. The footsteps on the stairs were getting closer. I had maybe 30 seconds before whatever was up there came down to see what the noise was about. Dave, I don't care how crazy you think this hunger thing is. We need to get out of this house right now. He shook his head, still smiling that terrible smile. You can't fight it, Margaret. The more you try to resist, the worse it gets. I know. I tried for 2 days. 2 days. That meant the avalanche call had been fake. These people had been missing for 2 days, and nobody knew where they really were. How many others are alive up there? Alive? Dave laughed. That depends on how you define alive. There's Sarah and Tom from our group. They're changing like I did. And then there are the old ones, the ones who've been here since 1950. The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. I could hear whispering now, voices too low to make out words, but somehow familiar, like voices from a half-remembered dream. 35 years they've been waiting, Dave continued, living on whatever wanders into their territory. Deer, bears, the occasional hiker. But human meat is what they really crave, what they need to stay strong. I heard a wet, sliding sound from upstairs, like something being dragged across the floor. Dave, I'm leaving. You can come with me, or stay here, but I'm not sticking around to meet your friends. I started backing toward the door, gun still pointed at him, but my legs felt weak and shaky. The hunger was getting worse, sharp pains shooting through my stomach like I was being stabbed from the inside. You won't make it to your snowmobile, Dave said. The hunger will drop you before you get halfway there. And even if you do make it, where will you go? The storm's already started. I looked toward the window and saw he was right. Snow was coming down hard now, thick flakes that would bury my tracks in minutes. The wind was howling like a wounded animal. Besides, Dave added, you don't really want to leave. Not when there's so much good food right here. He was right, and that scared me more than anything. The smell of the hanging meat was driving me crazy. My mouth was watering so much I had to keep swallowing, and all I could think about was how it would taste. The footsteps started again, coming down the stairs this time. Slow, careful steps like someone was carrying something heavy. I made my decision. "Dave, I'm sorry." I shot him. The bullet caught him in the chest, and he staggered backward. But instead of falling down, he just looked at the wound with mild interest. "Huh," he said. "That stings a little." Black blood was leaking from the hole in his chest, but it wasn't gushing like it should have been. It was thick and slow, like syrup. "You can't kill us the old way anymore, Margaret. And the hunger changes everything. Our blood, our bones, our hearts. We're something new now." I shot him again, this time in the head. The bullet knocked him sideways, and he fell against the kitchen counter. But after a few seconds, he pushed himself back up, the hole in his skull already starting to close. "That's actually pretty annoying," he said, reaching up to feel the healing wound. "But it won't stop me for long." The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. I could hear breathing now, fast, excited panting like dogs waiting for dinner. "Margaret," a woman's voice called from the hallway. "Is that you, honey? We've been waiting for you." I knew that voice. It was my dispatcher, Carol, who'd sent me up here in the first place. But Carol was back at the ranger station, 40 miles away. She couldn't be here. "That's not possible," I whispered. Dave grinned, showing those sharp teeth again. "The hunger shows us things, true things. Carol's been working with them for years, sending rangers up here one by one. You're not the first, Margaret. You're just the latest." A figure appeared in the doorway, tall and thin like Dave, but wearing the shredded remains of a ranger uniform. The name tag said Phillips. I remembered Phillips. He'd gone missing 3 years ago on a routine patrol. Search teams never found his body. "Hey there, Maggie," Phillips said, using the nickname only the old-timers called me. His eyes were the same flat black as Dave's. "Good to see you again." Behind him came 2 more shapes. A woman in hiking gear with long gray hair hanging over her face, and something that might have been human once but was now so thin and stretched it looked like a scarecrow made of bones and skin. "The originals," Dave explained, gesturing to the scarecrow thing. "What's left of the 1950 survivors. They've been here so long they're barely human anymore. But you're the ones who figured it all out first." The thing that used to be human opened its mouth and made a sound like wind through a broken window. Somehow I understood it was trying to say my name. "She says, 'Welcome to the family,'" Dave translated. My hunger pains were getting worse. I could barely stand up straight. The gun in my hands felt like it weighed 100 pounds. "What do you want from me?" "Just one little bite," the woman with gray hair said, stepping closer. I could see her face now, or what was left of it. Her nose and lips were mostly gone, eaten away by frostbite or something worse. "One taste, and you'll understand everything." "The hunger will kill you if you don't feed it," Phillips added. "I held out for 6 days, thought I was strong enough to beat it, but in the end, I was begging them to let me taste." I looked around the kitchen trying to think of a way out. The window was boarded up. The only exit was through the living room, past all of them. "You can't fight nature, Margaret," Dave said, "and this is what we really are. Predators, the top of the food chain." The gray-haired woman reached out with fingers that were too long and had too many joints. "Just a little bite, from me to you." Her fingernails had grown into claws, yellow and sharp as broken glass. She pressed one against my neck, and I felt a drop of blood run down my collar. The smell of my own blood made the hunger explode in my stomach like a bomb. I doubled over, retching, but nothing came up. I hadn't eaten anything solid in hours. "There we go," Dave said. "Feel that? That's your body telling you what it needs." The woman lifted her bloody finger to my lips. Just a taste. I could smell it, my own blood, but somehow different, richer, more appealing than any food I'd ever smelled before. My tongue flicked out before I could stop it. The moment my blood touched my taste buds, everything changed. It was like someone had turned on a light in a dark room. Suddenly I could see clearly, see what I really was, what I'd always been meant to be. The hunger wasn't a curse or a sickness. It was an awakening. "Yes," Dave whispered. Now you're starting to understand. But even as the blood sang in my mouth, some small part of my brain was screaming warnings. This wasn't right. This wasn't human. I bit down on my own tongue, hard enough to draw fresh blood, hard enough to shock myself back to reality. No, I said, spitting out the blood. No, this isn't what I am. I raised my gun again, but this time I pointed it at the hanging meat. This ends now. Phillips lunged at me, moving faster than anything human should be able to move. But 20 years of ranger training kicked in. I rolled sideways, came up behind the kitchen table, and started firing. Not at them, at the meat hanging from the ceiling. Each bullet tore through the strips of flesh, sending chunks of frozen human remains flying around the room. The creatures screamed like I was killing them, not just destroying their food supply. "Stop!" Dave shrieked. "You're wasting it!" But I kept firing until my clip was empty. The kitchen floor was covered with pieces of what had once been Dave's hiking companions. The scarecrow thing made a sound like a dying animal and collapsed to its knees, trying to gather up the scattered meat. "You don't understand," the gray-haired woman said, but her voice was weaker now, desperate. "Without the meat, we can't survive the winter. We'll starve." "Good," I said, reloading my gun. "Maybe you should have thought of that before you started eating people." Phillips was backing toward the stairs. "This isn't over. The hunger's in you now. You'll be back." He was wrong. I could feel the hunger, yes. It was like a wild animal clawing at the inside of my stomach. But I was stronger than it. I had to be. I made it out of the house, but barely. The hunger was like a living thing inside me, fighting every step I took away from that kitchen. My legs hooked so badly I could hardly walk, and black spots danced in front of my eyes. The storm was getting worse. Snow was coming down so hard I could barely see 10 feet in any direction. My snowmobile was where I'd left it, but it was already half buried. I dug it out with my hands, fingers numb with cold, and tried to start it. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch. Again and again I pulled the cord, but nothing. Behind me, I could hear them coming out of the house, footsteps in the snow, getting closer. "Margaret," Dave's voice called through the wind. "You can't leave us. You're part of the family now." I tried the engine one more time. It sputtered, coughed, and died. "The taste of blood is in your mouth," Phillips said. He sounded closer now. "You'll never get it out. Every time you try to eat normal food, you'll remember how much better the real thing tastes." He was right about that. Even now, with my life in danger, part of me was thinking about going back to that kitchen, about letting them show me what I could become. I pulled out my emergency flare gun and fired it straight up. The red light bloomed against the gray sky, but who would see it in weather like this? "Nobody's coming for you," the gray-haired woman said. She was standing just at the edge of the light from my headlamp, her ruined face barely visible in the snow. "Carol made sure of that. As far as anyone knows, you're investigating a routine avalanche. They won't even start looking until tomorrow." My radio crackled with static, and then Carol's voice came through clear as day. "Margaret, this is base. What's your status?" I grabbed the radio. "Carol, thank God. I need immediate backup at Colewood. Multiple casualties, hostile survivors. Send everyone you can." "I'm sorry, Margaret, but that's not going to happen." The voice was still Carol's, but something about it was wrong. Too calm, too controlled. "You see," the voice continued, "Colewood serves a very important purpose. It keeps the old ones fed, and in return, they keep the secret. No one ever has to know what really happened." Penned here in 1950. I stared at the radio in horror. "Carol?" I've been sending people up there for 15 years now. Rangers who ask too many questions, hikers who wander into areas they shouldn't. It's really quite efficient. Dave stepped into the light, grinning that terrible grin. "She's been our partner for a long time, helps us stay fed, helps keep the Forest Service from poking around too much." "But Margaret," Carol's voice said from the radio, "you're special. You're Cherokee, like the old spirits that live in these mountains. Your blood is stronger than the others. If you join them willingly, you could become their leader." The hunger clawed at my insides. I was so weak now I could barely stand. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was just nature taking its course. Think about it, Dave said, extending his hand toward me. No more cold nights sleeping in ranger cabins. No more loneliness. We're a family here, Margaret. A real family. I looked at his outstretched hand. The fingers were longer than they should be, with black nails that curved like claws. But somehow, it looked inviting. Just take my hand, he whispered. Let me show you what you're really meant to be. I reached out, my fingers almost touching his. Then I saw something that changed everything. Behind Dave, half hidden in the falling snow, was a small wooden cross. Carved into the wood was a name. Jenny Morrison, age 8, beloved daughter. A child's grave. And if Dave's last name was Morrison, she was your daughter, I said. Dave's smile flickered for just a second. That was a long time ago. You brought your own daughter up here, on a family skiing trip. The hunger doesn't care about family, Philip said. It only cares about survival. But I could see the truth in Dave's black eyes now. The guilt, the horror of what he'd done, what he'd been forced to become. She was 8 years old, I said, and you ate her. She was already dying, Dave screamed, the calm mask finally cracking. The cold was killing her. At least this way, she could help her father survive. That did it. The rage that flooded through me burned away the hunger like fire burns away smoke. These things weren't a new form of human evolution. They were just broken people who'd given up their humanity to survive. I pulled out my flare gun and fired it point blank into Dave's chest. The flare exploded against him in a burst of red fire. He screamed and staggered backward, his clothes catching flame. But more importantly, the other creatures backed away from the light. Fire. They were afraid of fire. I had 3 more flares in my emergency kit. I loaded another one and fired it at the gray-haired woman. She shrieked and fled into the darkness. Fire represents civilization, I said, loading the 3rd flare. Cooking food instead of eating it raw. Building homes instead of living in caves. Everything that separates us from animals. Phillips was backing toward the house. You can't burn all of us, and the hunger will bring you back. You'll see. Maybe, I said. But I can sure as hell try. I fired the 3rd flare into the house. The old wood caught immediately, flames racing up the walls and across the roof. The creatures inside started screaming. Dave was rolling in the snow, trying to put out the flames on his clothes. But the fire seemed to burn colder than normal fire. It was eating away at his changed flesh, turning him back into something recognizably human. Please, he gasped. The pain. Make it stop. I looked at him lying there, no longer the monster who'd been trying to convert me, but just a broken man who'd lost his daughter to his own hunger. I used my last flare to end his suffering. The house burned for hours. I sat in the snow, watching it burn, feeling the hunger slowly fade from my system. By the time the flames died down, it was almost morning. My snowmobile started on the first try. I made it back to the ranger station just after dawn. Cartas. Bull was there, just like always, sitting behind her radio desk with a cup of coffee and a worried expression. Margaret, thank God you're all right. We lost radio contact yesterday evening. How did the avalanche rescue go? I stared at her for a long moment. She looked completely normal. Middle-aged, graying hair, the same Carol I'd worked with for 10 years. No sign of the monster voice I'd heard on the radio. There was no avalanche, I said. What? But the emergency beacon. The skiers had been missing for 2 days. Someone used their beacon to lure me up there. Carol frowned and checked her logbook. That's impossible. The call came in yesterday afternoon. I have it right here. She showed me the entry, written in her own handwriting. Date, time, GPS coordinates for the avalanche site. Everything looked legitimate. Carol, I said carefully, did you hear my radio calls yesterday? When I asked for backup? I never heard from you after you left for Colewood. That's why I was so worried. Either she was lying or something very strange had happened to my radio transmissions. But looking at her now, seeing the genuine concern in her eyes, I was starting to think it was the latter. What did you find up there? she asked. I could have told her the truth, about Dave Morrison and his hiking club, about the cannibals from 1950, about the hunger that had nearly turned me into one of them. But who would believe it? Even I was starting to wonder if it had all been some kind of hallucination brought on by altitude sickness and hunger. The skiers never made it to Colewood, I said finally. I found evidence they went off trail about 5 miles south and fell into a ravine. I'll organize a proper search team this morning. Carol nodded and made a note in her log. Thank God you didn't find any bodies. Maybe they're still alive down there. I almost told her that I'd all Eddie found the bodies hanging from the ceiling of a kitchen like strips of jerky. But that would lead to questions I couldn't answer. Maybe, I said. The official search went on for 3 days. We found Dave Morrison's group at the bottom of Miller's Ravine, just like I'd said we would. They'd been dead for at least a week. Avalanche victims, according to the coroner. The bodies were badly damaged, but no one looked too closely at exactly what kind of damage. I put in for a transfer the next month. Told my supervisor I needed a change of scenery, maybe something closer to civilization. He approved it without question. But here's the thing that still bothers me 3 years later. Sometimes, late at night in my new apartment in Charleston, I get hungry. Not normal hungry, the other kind. The kind that makes my mouth water when I see the raw hamburger at the grocery store. The kind that makes me think about what my neighbors might taste like. And sometimes I dream about Colewood, about the house burning, about Dave Morrison screaming as the flames consumed him. But in the dreams, I'm not the one who started the fire. I'm one of the things trying to escape it. I've started seeing a psychiatrist. Told her I have PTSD from my time as a ranger, which is true enough. She's got me on medication that helps with the hunger, but she doesn't know that's what it's for. Survivor's guilt is very common, she tells me. It's normal to have disturbing thoughts after a traumatic experience. Normal. Right. Last week I got a letter forwarded from my old ranger station. No return address, postmarked from somewhere in West Virginia. Inside was a single photograph. The Colewood ruins, taken from a distance. The house I'd burned down was standing again. Completely intact, like the fire had never happened. On the back of the photo, someone had written in careful handwriting, "The family misses you. There's always room for one more." I burned the photograph, but I kept the message. Because the truth is, part of me misses them too. Part of me remembers how good it felt to Teos, Ostblood, how right it seemed to give in to the hunger. And sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night fighting off the dreams, I wonder if I really won that night in Colewood, or if they're just waiting for me to come home. The hunger never really goes away, you see. It just sleeps, waiting for the right moment to wake up. And every day, that moment gets a little bit closer. My name is Elizabeth Moonridge, and I've been a forest ranger for 12 years. People always ask about my last name. Sounds made up, doesn't it? But it's real, just like the Cherokee blood running through my veins and the PhD in anthropology hanging on my office wall. I work the Jefferson National Forest in Virginia, specifically the Clinch Mountain area where the trees grow thick and the old stories run deeper than mountain roots. March of 1983 brought flooding rains and mudslides, the kind that wash away hiking trails and expose things that were better left buried. That's when the reports started coming in. 3 hikers attacked by what witnesses described as a wild man, something that walked on 2 legs but moved like an animal. The attacks happened near Newman's Ridge, an isolated area where the old Melungeon families used to live. Now, I knew about the Melungeons from my studies. Mixed-race people who settled in Appalachia centuries ago, claiming to be Portuguese or Cherokee when being black could get you killed. White folks called them mysterious, made up stories about them having 6 fingers or blue skin. Academic nonsense, mostly, just racism dressed up as folklore. The shape-shifting stories were the worst kind of prejudice, designed to make these people seem less than human. But I had to check it out anyway. That was my job. The first victim was a college kid named Danny Walsh from Richmond. Found him 3 miles off the main trail, unconscious with claw marks across his back, deep ones that needed 47 stitches. Danny claimed something that looked like a hairy man came at him from behind a boulder, moving faster than anything human should move. Park rangers wrote it up as a black bear attack, but bears don't usually go after people unless they're protecting cubs, and it was too early in the season for that. The second attack happened a week late. Our Jennifer Oakes, a genealogist from Norfolk, got grabbed while photographing old gravestones in what used to be a Melungeon settlement. She escaped, but barely. Said the thing that chased her had human eyes, bright amber ones that seemed to glow in the shadows. It followed her for 2 miles, staying just out of sight, making sounds that weren't quite growls and weren't quite words. I drove up to Newman's Ridge on a gray Thursday morning when the mist hung between the mountains like cigarette smoke. The dirt road stopped about 3 miles before the actual settlement, if you could call it that anymore. Just a few scattered cabins and the ruins of houses that had been empty since the 1920s. To get there, you had to hike a trail so narrow and overgrown that GPS couldn't track it properly. The silence hit me first. No bird songs, no squirrel chatter, no insect buzz, just the sound of my boots on wet leaves and the distant drip of water from branches. Even my radio went quiet once I got about a mile in. Static at first, then nothing at all. I found the third victim myself. Sarah Mitchell sat on a fallen log beside an old cemetery, staring at weathered headstones like she was reading the Sunday paper. She should have been dead. The emergency call had come in 6 hours earlier, reporting screams and sounds of a struggle. Search teams had been looking for her body. Instead, there she was, perfectly fine except for one thing that made my blood run cold. Sarah's driver's license said she had blue eyes. The woman looking up at me had eyes the color of dark honey, so bright they seemed to catch light that wasn't there. When she smiled, I noticed her canine teeth looked sharper than they should. "You're the ranger," she said, and her voice had a quality I couldn't place, deeper than it should be for a woman her size. "I was hoping someone would come." "Ma'am, are you hurt? We've been looking for you." She laughed, a sound that raised the hair on my arms. "Hurt? No, I don't think so. Changed, maybe. But not hurt." "Changed how?" Sarah stood up, moving with a fluid grace that reminded me of something predatory. "I remember things now, things that happened before I was born. My great-great-grandmother's memories. She lived here once, you know, before they made us leave." That's when I noticed Sarah was speaking perfect Cherokee, words I recognized from childhood, from my grandmother's stories. But according to her file, Sarah Mitchell was a white woman from Virginia Beach who'd been researching family genealogy. She shouldn't have known a single word of Cherokee, let alone speak it like she was born to it. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me. There are people worried about you." "Are there?" She tilted her head in a way that seemed more animal than human. "Or are they worried about what I might tell them?" The temperature dropped 10 degrees in the space of a heartbeat. My breath came out in white puffs, even though it had been mild all morning. Sarah smiled wider, and I definitely saw fangs this time. "You should go now, Elizabeth Moonridge," she said, pronouncing my name like she'd known it all her life, "before the sun goes down. They don't like strangers after dark." I wanted to ask who they were, but something told me I didn't want to know the answer. Not yet. I should have taken Sarah's advice and left before sunset. Should have called for backup. Should have followed protocol. Should have done a lot of things. Instead, I pitched my tent in a clearing about a quarter mile from the old settlement and settled in for the night. My radio was still dead, but I had emergency flares and enough experience to handle whatever the mountains might throw at me. At least, that's what I told myself. The first sound came around midnight, a low moaning that could have been wind through the trees, except there wasn't any wind. It went on for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped so suddenly the silence felt like a physical weight pressing down on the valley. I unzipped my tent flap and looked out. The moon was nearly full, bright enough to see by, but something was wrong with the shadows. They moved independently of the trees that should have been casting them, stretching and writhing like living things. My flashlight beam seemed weaker than it should, barely penetrating the darkness beyond 20 feet. That's when I saw the eyes. 2 bright amber spots about 7 feet off the ground, watching me from the tree line. Too high for a bear, too wide set for a person. They didn't blink, didn't move, just stared with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. I kept my flashlight trained on them, but they didn't reflect the light the way animal eyes should. Instead, they seemed to glow from within. "Hello?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly shaky. "Is someone there?" The eyes tilted to one side, like a curious dog. Then they disappeared. I sat in my tent for the next hour, listening to sounds that shouldn't exist. Footsteps, too heavy for a human, too light for a bear. Branches snapping under weight, but no accompanying rustle of leaves. Worst of all were the voices. Whispered conversations in Cherokee, too far away to make out words, but close enough to know they were talking about me. When dawn finally came, I found tracks around my campsite. Human footprints, but wrong somehow. Too wide, with claw marks where toes should be. They circled my tent 3 times, then headed back toward the settlement. I followed them. The old Melungeon community consisted of maybe 6 buildings still standing, plus the foundations of a dozen more. Most were just rotting log cabins slowly being reclaimed by the forest, but one house looked inhabited. Smoke rose from its chimney, and I could see curtains in the windows. An elderly woman sat on the front porch, rocking in a chair that looked older than the mountains. She had the kids, and of weathered face that comes from a lifetime of hard living, with steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her skin had an olive tone that could have been Mediterranean, Native, American, or African, the kind of ambiguous features that had caused so much trouble for the Melungeon people over the years. "You're the ranger asking questions," she said before I could introduce myself. Her voice carried the mountain accent I'd grown up with, but underneath it was something else. Something older. "Yes, ma'am. Elizabeth Moonridge. I know who you are, child. Your grandmother was Jenny Littlefeather from the Wolf Clan. Good woman. Taught you the old stories, didn't she?" I stopped walking. Nobody outside my family knew about my grandmother's Cherokee name, and I'd never mentioned it in any official capacity. "How did you—" "Sit down, Elizabeth. We need to talk." I climbed the porch steps and took a seat in a wooden chair beside her. Up close, I could see her eyes were the same amber color as Sarah's had become. "Name's Mahala Goins," she said. "My people have lived on this ridge for 200 years. Longer, if you count what came before." "What came before?" Mahala smiled, revealing teeth that looked too sharp. "Cherokee, mostly. My great-grandmother was full-blood Cherokee, married a Portuguese sailor who jumped ship in Norfolk. That's the story we told anyway. Truth is more complicated." "What's the truth?" "Truth is some bloodlines carry more than just memories. They carry gifts, powers that sleep until they're needed." She gestured toward the forest around us. "Your people attacked those hikers because they were getting too close to secrets that need staying buried." "My people?" "The ones who've been changed. Like Sarah Mitchell. Like my grandson Zeke. Like you will be if you're not careful." Before I could ask what she meant, a sound echoed through the valley that turned my blood to ice water. It was part howl, part roar, part human scream. The kind of sound that evolution programmed into human DNA as a signal to run like hell. "They're hot. Bunting," Mahala said calmly, still rocking. "Best get inside." The sound came again, closer this time. Then another voice answered from a different direction. And another. Within seconds, the mountains were alive with inhuman calls that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "What are they hunting?" I whispered. Mahala stood up with surprising grace for someone her age. "You, child. They can smell Cherokee blood from miles away, especially when it's awakening." "Awakening to what?" But she was already heading inside, and the sounds were getting closer. I had 2 choices. Follow an elderly woman who might be insane into her house, or face whatever was making those sounds in the open. The decision made itself when something crashed through the underbrush about 50 yards away. Something big enough to snap trees and fast enough to close the distance in seconds. I bolted for the door just as a shadow the size of a grizzly bear, but moving like a wolf, came charging out of the forest. Mahala slammed the door behind me and threw 3 separate deadbolts. The windows, I noticed, were barred with iron thick enough to stop a truck. "Now we wait," she said, "and I'll tell you about your inheritance." Outside, something that sounded like a mix between a bear and a man began testing the strength of her walls. The thing outside Mahala's house circled us for 3 hours. I could track its movement by the sounds, heavy footfalls that shook the floorboards, claws scraping against the log walls, deep huffing breaths that fogged the barred windows. Sometimes it walked on 2 legs, sometimes on 4. Sometimes it made sounds that were almost words. "That's my great-grandson Zeke," Mahala said, calm as if she was talking about the weather. "He's testing you, seeing if you'll panic." "Testing me for what?" "To see if the blood's true." She poured coffee from a pot that had been sitting on her wood stove, handed me a cup. "Cherokee shapeshifter bloodlines don't show up in everyone. Takes specific combinations. Cherokee mother, certain other lineages mixed in. Portuguese, Melungeon, sometimes African. The mixing made it stronger, not weaker." I wanted to tell her she was crazy, but the thing outside chose that moment to rear up on its hind legs and peer through the kitchen window. In the moonlight, I could see it clearly for the first time. It had a bear's body but wrong proportions. Too tall, too broad through the shoulders. The head was the worst part. Mostly bear, but with human eyes and a mouth that could probably form words if it wanted to. When it saw me looking, it tapped the glass with one claw and made a sound that might have been laughter. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "Jesus had nothing to do with this," Mahala said. "This is older magic, Cherokee magic mixed with whatever the first Melungeons brought from across the ocean. Makes for interesting children." "You're telling me that thing used to be human?" "Still is human, just shaped different. Zeke can take full bear form when he needs to, human form when he doesn't. Right now, he's somewhere in between because he's not sure if you're friend or foe." The creature, Zeke, dropped to all 4s and padded around to the front door. I heard him testing the locks, then settling down on the porch like a dog guarding its home. "Why is this happening?" I asked. "Why now?" Mahala sat down across from me at her kitchen table. "Because people are asking too many questions. Genealogists like Sarah coming up here with their computers and DNA tests, trying to figure out where the Melungeons really came from. Some secrets are dangerous when they get out." "So you're killing people to keep them quiet?" "Nobody's been killed. Changed, yes. Turned into something that understands the importance of keeping family secrets. Sarah's not dead. She's family now. Part of the pack." "What about the other hikers?" "Danny Walsh is staying with my cousin down in Wise County, learning to control his new appetites. Jennifer Oakes is still adjusting, but she'll come around. They all do, eventually." I set down my coffee cup with shaking hands. "You're talking about infecting people with some kind of shapeshifter curse." "Not curse. Gift. Inheritance." Mahala's eyes gleamed in the lamplight. "Your grandmother, Jenny, knew about this. Why do you think she taught you Cherokee? Why do you think she made sure you learned about plants and animals in the old ways?" "Because she was proud of her heritage. Because she was preparing you. Moonridge isn't just a pretty name, child. It's Cherokee for guardian of the sacred mountain. Your family were the keepers of shapeshifter bloodlines for 3 generations. Before I could respond, glass shattered in the back bedroom. Something had broken through a barred window, which should have been impossible. Heavy footsteps moved through the house, and I heard Mahala curse under her breath. "That's not Zeke," she whispered. A new voice called out from the back of the house, Sarah Mitchell's voice, but deeper and rougher than it had been that afternoon. "Mahala, is the ranger still here? We need to talk to her." "We?" 3 sets of footsteps moved toward the kitchen. Sarah appeared in the doorway, followed by 2 men I didn't recognize. All 3 had the same amber eyes and predatory grace I'd noticed in Sarah. All 3 moved like they were more comfortable on 4 legs than 2. "Elizabeth," Sarah smiled, showing fangs. "I'm glad you stayed. We have so much to show you." "Like what?" One of the men stepped forward. He was maybe 40, with dark hair and the kind of build that comes from a lifetime of hard physical work. Like the caves under Newman's Ridge. Like the place where Cherokee shamans used to perform the changing rituals. Like what happens when dormant bloodlines wake up. I don't have dormant bloodlines, Sarah laughed. And why can you understand us when we speak Cherokee? Why does your skin feel hot when we're around? Why do you smell like pack family instead of prey? She was right about the heat. My skin was burning up, and I could feel sweat running down my back despite the cool night air. Worse, I was starting to smell things that hadn't been there before. The individual scents of each person in the room, the musk of the creature outside, something that smelled like wet earth and old bones coming from deeper in the house. The change is already starting, the second man said. He was younger, maybe 25, with the kind of olive skin that marked him as Melungeon. It always does when pack members gather. Blood calls to blood. What change? The good kind, Sarah said. The kind that makes you stronger, faster, smarter. The kind that gives you memories going back 10 generations and senses that can track a mouse through a blizzard. My vision was getting sharper. I could see details in the dim kitchen that shouldn't have been visible. Dust motes floating in the air, the grain pattern in the wooden table, individual whiskers on Mahala's chin. My hearing was amplifying too. I could hear heartbeats, the rush of blood through veins, the sound of breathing from every person in the room, and under it all, I could hear something else. Voices speaking Cherokee, coming from somewhere underground. Old voices chanting words that made my bones vibrate with recognition. The caves, I whispered. She hears them, the older man said. The ancestors. They're calling her home. Mahala stood up, her ancient joints creaking. Time to go, Elizabeth. Time to learn about your real inheritance. Outside, Zeke let out a howl that was answered by at least 6 other voices scattered throughout the valley. The pack was gathering, and something deep in my DNA was responding to their call. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt like I was finally coming home. The entrance to the caves was hidden behind a waterfall about half a mile from Mahala's house. In daylight, you'd walk Remos, past it. But at night, with senses that were changing by the minute, I could smell the ancient air flowing out of the mountain like breath from sleeping giants. Sarah led the way, moving through the darkness without a flashlight. The rest of us followed. Mahala, the 2 men, who I learned were cousins named Marcus and Tommy Goins, and Zeke, who had shifted back to human form but kept the amber eyes and pointed teeth. He wore clothes that had seen better days, torn and patched from multiple transformations. How long have you been doing this? I asked him as we climbed down wet stone steps carved into the cave wall. Changing? Since I was 16. Been in the family for generations, but it usually skips people. I got lucky. His voice was rougher than it should have been, like he'd spent years growling instead of talking. Lucky. You'll understand once you see the memory cave. The tunnels went deeper than any natural cave system should, miles underground, through chambers large enough to hold houses and passages so narrow we had to crawl. My new senses were going crazy. I could smell water and limestone and something else, something organic that had been down here for centuries. The Cherokee voices were getting louder. Who's doing the chanting? I asked Mahala. Nobody living, she said. But the caves remember. Stone holds on to sound for a very long time, especially when that sound carries power. We reached a chamber where someone had carved Cherokee symbols into every surface, walls, ceiling, floor. My grandmother had taught me some of the old writing, but these symbols were older, more complex. They seemed to glow with their own light, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. This is where it happens, Sarah said, where Cherokee shamans used to help people find their animal spirits. But for certain bloodlines, for people like us, it's different. We don't just find our spirits, we become them. In the center of the chamber was a pool of black water, perfectly still, and so deep I couldn't see the bottom. The chanting was coming from the water itself, voices of Cherokee shamans who had performed rituals here hundreds of years ago. The Portuguese sailor who married into the Cherokee line wasn't Portuguese, Marcus said. He was something else. something from across the ocean that carried shapeshifter blood. When that mixed with Cherokee bear spirit magic, it created something new. Created us, Tommy added. Melungeon were bears. Not full Cherokee, not full anything, but stronger than either bloodline alone. Sarah knelt beside the pool and put her hand in the water. The chanting got louder, and I could smell something that made my mouth water. Raw meat, fresh blood, the musk of living animals. Your turn, Elizabeth. My turn for what? To choose. You can walk out of here and forget everything you've seen. We'll make sure you get back to your truck safely. You can go back to your ranger job and live a normal human life. Or you can accept your inheritance. Become what your bloodline was meant to be. Join the pack. Help us protect the old ways. The water in the pool was calling to me. I could feel it pulling at something deep in my chest, something that had been sleeping my whole life and was finally waking up. The Cherokee chanting was getting louder, and now I could understand the words. Come home, daughter of the Wolf Clan. Come home, guardian of the sacred mountain. Accept what your grandmother prepared you for. What happens if I choose the inheritance? You change, Zeke said. Physically, mentally, spiritually. You become part of something bigger than yourself. You get access to ancestral memories, enhanced senses, the ability to take bear form when needed. And the cost? You can never leave, Mahala said quietly. Not really. This valley becomes your territory. These people become your pack. And you spend the rest of your life protecting secrets that could destroy everything if they got out. I thought about my life outside the mountains, my small apartment in town, my job as a forest ranger, the normal human problems that had seemed so important a week ago. None of it felt real anymore. None of it felt like home. There are others like us, Sarah said, scattered through Appalachia, other families with mixed bloodlines. We look out for each other, share information, help new pack members adjust. And if someone threatens to expose us? We do what we have to do, Zeke said, but we prefer conversion to killing. Family is family, even if they don't know it yet. The pool was calling to me so strongly now that my feet were moving without my permission. I knelt beside Sarah and looked into the black water. My reflection looked back, but it wasn't quite right. My eyes were starting to glow amber, and my face looked leaner, more angular. The water shows you what you could become, Marcus said, what you were meant to be. As I watched, my reflection changed. My human features melted and reformed into something that was part woman, part bear, part something older and wilder than either. The creature in the water had my memories, but also others. Cherokee shamans performing rituals, Portuguese sailors carrying ancient magic across the ocean, Melungeon families hiding in the mountains and passing down secrets through blood and bone. I can see them, I whispered. All of them. Generations of my family. The inheritance isn't just physical, Mahala said. It's memory, knowledge, connection to everything that came before. I put my hand in the water. It was warm as blood and seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The moment my skin touched the surface, pain exploded through my entire body. Bones stretching, muscles expanding, teeth sharpening. The human part of me wanted to scream, but something deeper than human was singing with joy. When the pain stopped, I looked at my reflection again. The woman staring back at me had amber eyes and pointed teeth, but she was still recognizably me, just enhanced, improved, complete. Welcome to the family, Sarah said. Outside the cave, something howled, a sound of pure celebration that echoed through the mountains. The pack was welcoming its newest member, and every cell in my body was responding to their call. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The official report was filed 3 weeks later. Black bear attacks during mating season. Unusual but not unheard of in the Jefferson National Forest. The victims, Sarah Mitchell, Jennifer Oakes, and Danny Walsh, were all treated for minor injuries and released. All three had decided to relocate to rural Virginia permanently, citing a newfound appreciation for mountain living. Ranger Elizabeth Moonridge was commended for her thorough investigation and professional handling of a dangerous wildlife situation. She submitted a request for transfer to desk duty, claiming stress-related issues following the bear encounters. The request was approved without question. That's what the paperwork said. The truth was more complicated. I kept my apartment in town but spent most nights in the mountains, learning to control abilities that still amazed me. The first full transformation had been terrifying, feeling my human body dissolve and reform into something 8 feet tall with claws that could tear through oak trees. But Marcus and Tommy taught me how to hold on to my human mind during the change, how to stay myself even when wearing a bear's shape. The enhanced senses never went away. I could smell a deer from 2 miles off, hear conversations happening in the next county, see clearly on the darkest nights. My human form looked normal enough, but my eyes stayed amber, and my canine teeth remained sharper than they should be. I told people it was cosmetic contact lenses and dental work. Sarah adapted faster than any of us expected. Her genealogy background turned out to be perfect for Undie, understanding the complex family trees that connected all the southeastern shapeshifter bloodlines. She started keeping records, tracking which families carried dormant traits and which ones were producing new changers. "There are more of us than I realized," she told me during one of our midnight pack runs through the forest, scattered through Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina. Some know what they are. Others are still sleeping. Sleeping? Waiting for the right trigger. Stress, territorial threat, contact with active shifters. The blood remembers, even when the mind doesn't. Danny Walsh had taken to the change like he'd been born for it. His bear form was smaller than Zeke's, but faster, better suited for scouting and message running between isolated mountain communities. He'd quit his job in Richmond and moved to a cabin on the backside of Newman's Ridge, where he spent his days learning traditional Cherokee hunting techniques from Mahala. Jennifer Oakes had the hardest adjustment. She fought the change for weeks, trying to convince herself it was all some kind of shared delusion. But blood doesn't lie, and eventually she stopped fighting and started learning. Her academic background in library science made her our record keeper, documenting family histories and bloodline connections that went back centuries. The pack grew slowly. A hiker here, a genealogist there, usually people who were already carrying dormant shapeshifter genetics and just needed the right push to activate them. We were careful about who we chose, selective about who we trusted with the secret. Some people could handle the truth, others couldn't, and those we simply relocated with vague memories of bear attacks and close calls. My own transformation continued for months. The physical changes were obvious: enhanced strength, improved reflexes, senses that could track a mouse through a blizzard. But the mental changes were more profound. I had access to memories that weren't mine, ancestral knowledge passed down through blood and bone. I knew where to find medicinal plants, how to predict weather patterns, which caves held sacred Cherokee sites. Most importantly, I understood my purpose. Guardian of the Sacred Mountain, Mahala had called me, and now I knew what that meant. The Melungeon shapeshifter bloodlines were living links to older powers, older ways of understanding the world. We were the bridge between the human world and something wilder, something that civilization had tried to destroy, but never quite managed to eliminate. My job wasn't just to protect the pack. It was to protect the balance. 6 months after my first change, I was called to investigate reports of unusual animal activity in Shenandoah National Park. A family of hikers had reported seeing what looked like a wolf the size of a small horse, but wolves had been extinct in Virginia for decades. I knew what I'd find before I got there. Another bloodline awakening, probably triggered by encroaching development or some other territorial threat. Another family discovering abilities they didn't know they carried. Another group of people who needed guidance from someone who understood what they were going through. I packed my gear and headed for Shenandoah, humming an old Cherokee song my grandmother had taught me. The lyrics were about returning home, about finding your true family, about accepting gifts that came with both power and responsibility. In my rearview mirror, the mountains of Southwest Virginia grew smaller but never disappeared completely. They would always be there, calling me back whenever the pack needed their guardian. And someday, when I was old and gray like Mahala, I'd be the one sitting on a front porch, waiting for the next lost soul to find their way home to the sacred mountain. The bloodline would continue, the pack would endure, and the old magic would never truly die, as long as there were mountains to hide in and families willing to carry the inhus. Returns forward into whatever future awaited us. Some gifts are worth the cost of keeping them secret. Some secrets are worth becoming something more than human to protect. My name is Samuel Grimwood, and I've been a park ranger for 18 years. I used to be a history professor before this job, but I got tired of dusty classrooms and decided I wanted to work outdoors. The land between the lakes in Tennessee became my home, and I thought I knew every inch of these woods. I always laughed at the ghost stories. Tourists would ask me about the Bell Witch Cave, and I'd tell them the truth as I saw it. Just old family drama from the 1800s that got blown out of proportion. Mass hysteria, I called it. People back then didn't understand mental illness or family problems, so they blamed everything on spirits. That was before October 1981. It started with small things. Visitors to the Bell family cemetery began complaining about their cameras breaking for no reason. Electronics would just stop working near the old Bell homestead ruins. At first, I figured it was just the damp air getting into their equipment. Then came the phone calls. Ranger Grimwood? Something attacked my daughter at the Bell Cave yesterday. We couldn't see what it was, but she has scratches all over her arms. Sir, there are no dangerous animals in that area. I'm telling you, something invisible grabbed her and threw her down. I'd heard stories like this before from drunk teenagers trying to scare their friends, but this caller was a middle-aged woman from Nashville, and she sounded genuinely scared. The next day, I drove out to check the cave area myself. October in Tennessee is beautiful. The leaves were turning gold and red, and there was that crisp smell in the air that makes you want to take deep breaths. The Bell Cave sat in a limestone hollow, surrounded by old oak trees that had probably been there when the original Bell family lived nearby. I walked the trail where the woman said her daughter was attacked. Everything looked normal. No unusual animal tracks, no sighs, gins of struggle, just fallen leaves and the quiet sound of wind through branches. But something felt wrong. I'd been in these woods thousands of times, but that day they felt different. The birds were too quiet. My radio kept crackling with static even though I was in a clear area, and I had this feeling that someone was watching me even though I couldn't see anybody around. When I got back to the ranger station, I found a note on my desk from my supervisor. Check out the Bell site more often, getting too many complaints. That night, I did some research on the original Bell Witch story. I'd always known the basic facts. From 1817 to 1821, the Bell family claimed they were haunted by the spirit of Kate Batts, a neighbor who'd had a land dispute with John Bell. The thing supposedly threw objects, made strange noises, and even talked to people. What I didn't know was how detailed the records were. People wrote letters about it. Neighbors testified about what they saw. Even Andrew Jackson supposedly visited the place and left the next day, saying he'd rather face the British again than spend another night with the Bell Witch. Either a lot of people were lying, or something really strange had happened in those woods. I was starting to think it might have been the latter. The next morning I got another call that changed everything. Is this Ranger Grimwood? My name is Lucy Bell Adams. I think I need your help. The last name caught my attention right away. Bell, are you related to... Yes. I'm John Bell's great-great-granddaughter. Something's happening at the old homestead, and I think it's starting again. We met that afternoon at the ruins of the Bell family home. Lucy was about 30, with dark hair and worried eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. It started 3 weeks ago, she told me as we walked toward the crumbling foundation stones. I came here to some research for a family history project. Just wanted to see where my ancestors lived, you know? The old homestead wasn't much to look at anymore, just some stone foundations and a few rotting fence posts. But as we got closer, I noticed my compass needle started spinning in circles. The first time I thought it was just the wind, Lucy continued. Something knocked my notebook out of my hands, but there wasn't any wind that day. I knelt down to check my compass. The needle kept spinning no matter which way I turned it. That's strange. Must be some kind of mineral deposit affecting it. Then things started getting worse. Lucy's voice got quieter. Objects would move when I wasn't looking. I'd put my car keys on that stone there, turn around for a second, and find them hanging from a tree branch 20 feet away. I looked at the oak tree she pointed to. It was old and tall with thick branches. Could have been kids playing tricks. At 6 in the morning, in the middle of nowhere? She had a point. But the worst part is the voice, Lucy said, and I could hear the fear creeping into her words. It knows things about my family that nobody alive should know. Private things. Secrets. As if on cue, my radio crackled to life with static. Through the noise, I thought I heard something that sounded like an old woman's voice, but I couldn't make out the words. Did you hear that? Lucy grabbed my arm. I adjusted the radio, but now it was just normal static. Probably interference from somewhere. That's when it happened. A rock about the size of my fist flew out of nowhere and hit the ground right between us. Not thrown, it moved in a perfect arc like someone had pitched it, but there was nobody there. Lucy screamed and jumped backward. I spun around, looking for whoever had thrown it, but we were completely alone in the clearing. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. That was unusual. Another rock flew past my head, close enough that I felt the air move. Then another hit Lucy's shoulder, not hard enough to really hurt her, but enough to make her cry out. We need to leave, she said. Now! But as we turned to go back to our cars, more rocks started falling around us like invisible hands were throwing them. I grabbed Lucy's arm and we ran, stones hitting the ground all around our feet until we reached the parking area. When we got to our cars, breathing hard, I looked back at the homestead. Everything was quiet again, peaceful, like nothing had happened. This has been going on for 3 weeks? I asked. Lucy nodded. Every time I come here. And it's getting worse. Yesterday something shoved me so hard I fell down. I have the bruises to prove it. I looked at this scared woman and made a decision that would change everything. I'm going to help you figure out what's happening here. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those rocks flying through the air and my compass spinning like a broken toy. I'd been in these woods for almost 20 years, and I'd never seen anything like it. Around midnight, my phone rang. Samuel Grimwood? The voice was old and crackling like a bad phone connection. Yes. Who is this? You're meddling in things you don't understand, boy. The Bell family owes a debt, and it's time to pay. The line went dead. I checked my caller ID, but it just said unknown. I tried calling back, but got a busy signal. Outside my cabin, an owl hooted in the darkness, but it sounded almost like laughter. The next day, I drove back to the Bell homestead with Lucy, but this time I brought equipment, a camera, a tape recorder, and an electromagnetic field detector I'd borrowed from a friend who was into ghost hunting. You really think that stuff will help? Lucy asked as we walked toward the ruins. Can't hurt to try. The EMF detector started beeping as soon as we got within 50 yards of the old foundation. The needle jumped all the way to the red zone and stayed there. That's not normal, I muttered, tapping the device. Nothing about this place is normal, Lucy said. I started taking pictures with my camera, but every shot came out blurry or completely black, even though it was bright daylight. The tape recorder kept turning itself off no matter how many times I pressed record. It doesn't want to be documented, Lucy observed. That's when we heard the voice. It came from everywhere and nowhere, like sound bouncing off invisible walls. An old woman's voice, harsh and angry. Lucy Bell, you came back just like I knew you would. Your family always was too curious for their own good. Lucy grabbed my arm so hard her fingernails dug into my skin. That's her. That's the voice I've been hearing. Who are you? I called out, feeling foolish for talking to empty air. I'm Kate Batts, and this land belongs to me. Your ancestor John Bell stole it, and his family promised to make things right. But they never did. They ran away like cowards and left me here to rot. A cold wind started blowing even though the trees around us weren't moving. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. "What do you want?" Lucy asked, her voice shaking. "What's mine? What was always mine? The Bell family took my land, ruined my life, and promised to pay me back with interest. Now it's time to collect." Suddenly, Lucy was lifted off the ground by invisible hands. She rose about 3 feet in the air, kicking and screaming before being dropped hard onto the stone foundation. I ran to help her up, but something invisible shoved me backward so hard I stumbled and fell. "Don't touch her, Ranger man. This is Bell family business." "Leave her alone," I shouted, getting back to my feet. "Oh, you want to protect her? How sweet. But you can't fight what you can't see." Something hit me in the stomach like an invisible fist, knocking the wind out of me. Then hands I couldn't see grabbed my shoulders and threw me against a tree. I hit hard enough to see stars. Lucy was trying to crawl away, but she kept getting pulled back by her ankles, dragged, across the rough ground. "Stop it!" I yelled, struggling to stand up. "The Bell family made a promise in 1821, the voice said. "They swore on John Bell's grave that they would give me what I was owed. But they lied. They always lie." "What promise?" Lucy gasped from the ground. "What are you talking about?" "Your great-great-grandfather agreed to sign over the deed to my property, said his family would make sure I got justice. But as soon as I stopped bothering them, they forgot all about their promise." I managed to get to my feet and stumble toward Lucy, but invisible hands picked me up and threw me 20 feet through the air. I landed hard on my back, and everything went black for a moment. When I opened my eyes, Lucy was standing perfectly still in the middle of the ruins. But her face was wrong. Her expression had changed completely. Now she looked angry and old, even though her features were the same. "You want to know what it's like, Ranger?" Lucy's voice said. But it wasn't Lucy anymore. It was Kate Batts talking through her. "You want to know what it's like to be cheated and forgotten?" Lucy's body turned to look at me with eyes that weren't hers. "How about I show you?" Suddenly, I wasn't in the present anymore. The ruins around me rebuilt themselves in seconds, turning back into a proper log cabin with smoke coming from the chimney. The trees looked smaller, and the clearing was full of people in old-fashioned clothes from the 1800s. I watched John Bell himself, a tall man with dark hair, shaking hands with a short, angry-looking woman who had to be Kate Batts. "You'll get your land back, Mrs. Batts," John Bell was saying. "I give you my word as a gentleman. Once this haunting stops, we'll make everything right." "See how they lie?" Kate's voice whispered in my ear, even though I couldn't see her. "Watch what happens next." The scene jumped forward in timid. Now the cabin was empty and falling apart. John Bell was dead, and his family was loading wagons to leave Tennessee forever. "They ran," Kate's voice said bitterly. "Packed up in the middle of the night and left me with nothing. No land, no justice, no peace." The vision faded, and I was back in 1981, lying on my back in the ruins. Lucy collapsed to her knees, herself again, but looking exhausted. "Now you know," Kate's voice said from all around us. "The Bell family owes me a debt, and I'm going to collect it. With interest." The wind stopped, the cold lifted. Everything went quiet. But I knew this wasn't over. It was just beginning. That night I drove into town and spent hours at the library, digging through old records and newspaper clippings about the Bell family. What I found made my blood run cold. There really had been a promise. In 1821, just before the Bell Witch activity stopped, John Bell had signed a legal document agreeing to transfer ownership of disputed property to Kate Batts upon cessation of supernatural activities affecting the Bell household. But Kate Batts had died in 1817, before the haunting even started. The document was never filed. The Bell family left Tennessee in 1821, and the property stayed in their name for generations until the government bought it for the Land Between the Lakes project in the 1960s. Kate Batts had been cheated twice, once in life and once in death. I found Lucy at the Bell family cemetery the next morning. She was sitting beside John Bell's grave, looking like she hadn't slept at all. "She visited me in my dreams," Lucy said without looking up. "Showed me everything. How John Bell cheated her out of her land when she was alive. How she came back from the dead to get justice. and how they promised to make things right just to get rid of her. The legal document is real, I told her. I found it in the courthouse records. Your family really did agree to give her the land. Lucy finally looked at me. She says, if I don't honor the agreement my ancestors made, she'll follow me home. She'll haunt my children and my grandchildren until someone in the Bell family finally keeps their word. What exactly does she want? The deed to the original Bell property, all of it. She wants me to sign it over to her estate even though she's been dead for over 160 years. That seemed crazy, but then again, everything about this situation was crazy. There's something else, Lucy said quietly. She's getting stronger. Last night, she didn't just visit my dreams. She was in my house, moving things around, throwing furniture. My neighbors called the police because of all the noise. As if summoned by our conversation, Kate's voice drifted across the cemetery like wind through dry leaves. Time's running short, Lucy Bell. You can honor your family's promise, or you can suffer like I suffered. Choose wisely. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Frost formed on the grass around John Bell's headstone, even though it was a warm October day. She's here, Lucy whispered. Show yourself, I called out. If you want to make a deal, let's see who we're dealing with. The air shimmered above John Bell's grave, and slowly, a figure began to appear. At first it was just a shadow, but gradually it became more solid until we could see her clearly. Kate Batts looked exactly like I'd imagined from the historical descriptions. A small, fierce woman in her 60s, wearing a long black dress and a bonnet. But her eyes were the worst part. They glowed with a cold, angry light that made me want to look away. You want to see me, Ranger? Here I am. The woman John Bell destroyed. The woman his family forgot. She moved closer to Lucy, and with each step the grass died beneath her feet. I've waited 160 years for justice. I've watched Bell descendants live happy lives while I remained trapped in this place, unable to rest, unable to move on. Do you know what that's like? Do you know what it does to a soul? Lucy stood up slowly. I know my family wronged you, but I wasn't even born when that happened. Why should I pay for something my ancestors did? Kate's laugh was like ice cracking. Because that's how family works, girl. The sins of the fathers passed to the children. Your family prospered on stolen land while I rotted in the ground. What if I do what you want? Lucy asked. What if I sign over the deed? Will you leave the rest of my family alone? If you honor the promise John Bell made, I'll finally have what's mine. I'll be able to rest, and your family will be free of me forever. Kate moved even closer, and I could smell something like old flowers and damp earth. But if you refuse, I'll follow you home. I'll haunt your husband, your children, your children's children. Every Bell descendant will know my pain until someone finally does what's right. I could see Lucy struggling with the decision. The property she'd inherit from her family was worth a lot of money she probably needed. There's just one problem, I said, stepping between Kate and Lucy. Even if Lucy wanted to sign over the deed, you can't own property when you're dead. Legally, it's impossible. Kate's glowing eyes fixed on me. Clever Ranger. But I'm not asking for a legal transfer. I'm asking for justice. Lucy Bell can donate the land to the state in my name, create a memorial, acknowledge what her family did to me. That actually made sense. A public acknowledgement of the wrong that had been done, and a way for Kate to finally get recognition for what she'd suffered. But Lucy was shaking her head. I can't. That land is all my family has left. We've been holding on to it for generations. If I give it away, then you choose to let your family suffer as mine has suffered, Kate said, and her voice grew louder and more terrible. So be it. The ground began to shake. Wind whipped around us so hard I could barely stand. Kate's form grew larger and darker until she towered over us like a nightmare. You Bell family are all the same, she screamed. Liars and thieves! You'll pay for this! That's when Lucy did something that surprised everyone, including Kate. She walked right up to the angry spirit and looked her in the eye. You're right, Lucy said calmly. My family did wrong. They cheated you, and they broke their promise. I'm sorry for what they did to you, Kate Batts. You deserved better. The wind stopped. The shaking ground went still. I'll sign over the deed, Lucy continued. Not because you're threatening me, but because it's the right thing to do. My family owes you this, and I'm going to pay that debt. For a long moment, Kate just stared at her. Then slowly, the angry glow in her eyes began to fade. You'll really do it? After all this time? Yes, Lucy said. But I have one condition. Once I do this, you have to promise to rest in peace. No more haunting. No more anger. Let go of all that pain and move on to whatever comes next. Kate was quiet for so long I thought she might refuse. But finally, she nodded. If you truly honor the promise your family made, I'll finally be free to rest. The legal work took 3 weeks. Lucy had to jump through dozens of bureaucratic hoops to donate the Bell family property to the state of Tennessee in Kate Batts' name. The memorial plaque they installed reads, "In memory of Kate Batts, whose land disputes with the Bell family led to one of America's most famous ghost stories. May she finally rest in peace." I was there the day Lucy signed the final papers. We met at the old homestead one last time, and Kate appeared as we'd hoped she would. She looked different now. Less angry, more tired. Like someone who'd been carrying a heavy load for too long and was finally allowed to set it down. "It's done," Lucy told her, showing her the signed documents. "The land is officially dedicated to your memory." Kate nodded slowly. John, Bell's great-great-granddaughter, keeps the promise he could not. I thank you, Lucy Bell. You have freed both our families from this burden. The air around Kate began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. "What happens now?" I asked. Kate smiled for the first time since I'd met her. "Now I can rest. For the first time in 160 years, I can sleep." She was fading away, becoming transparent. "Will you be okay?" Lucy asked. "I will be at peace," Kate said, her voice growing distant. "And so will you. The debt is paid. The promise is kept. Tell my story, but tell it true. I was not evil. I was wronged, and I waited too long for justice. But justice came at last." With that, she was gone. The cold lifted from the air, and suddenly the old homestead felt like just another pretty spot in the woods. My official report listed the disturbances as seismic activity affecting the cave acoustics and creating unusual electromagnetic phenomena. The Park Service accepted that explanation and closed the file. But Lucy and I knew better. I got transferred to a different district in Kentucky a month later, but Lucy still sends me Christmas cards every year. She tells me the Bell family has had nothing but good luck since Kate found peace. Her husband got a promotion, her kids are doing well in school, and they were finally able to buy their own house. Sometimes other rangers from different states contact me about unusual paranormal reports. Word gets around that I know something about mountain spirits and family ghosts. I always tell them the same thing. Most hauntings aren't about evil spirits trying to hurt people. They're about unfinished business, broken promises, and injustices that need to be set right. The Bell Witch Cave is still a popular tourist spot. Visitors sometimes ask me about the ghost stories when I'm in the area, and I tell them Kate Batts isn't there anymore. She got what she was looking for and moved on. But late at night, when the wind blows through the limestone caves and the old oak trees, I sometimes think I can hear something like a contented sigh drifting through the darkness. Kate Batts is finally at rest. And sometimes, that's all a ghost really wants. My name is Thomas Blackthorne, and I've been a park ranger for 17 years. I work the Daniel Boone National Forest in Kentucky, mostly around Red River Gorge. It's quiet work, which suits me fine. After Sarah died in that mine collapse 5 years back, I needed the quiet. People think being a ranger is all about catching campers with illegal fires or helping lost hikers find their way. Most days that's true, but some days You get calls that make your skin crawl before you even know why. October 15th, 1976. That's the day everything changed for me. The call came in around 7 in the morning. I was drinking coffee in my station, watching fog roll through the valleys like ghost fingers. The radio crackled to life. "Thomas, you there?" It was Jim Mitchell from the main office. "I'm here. Got a situation near Devil's Backbone Ridge. Some college kids went missing." I set my coffee down. Devil's Backbone was bad country. Old mining territory that got abandoned after some accident back in the 20s. Most folks avoided it. "How many kids?" 4. Geology students from UK. Their professor found their car yesterday evening. Doors wide open, engine still running. Personal stuff scattered around like they left in a hurry. Or something scared them off, I muttered. "What's that?" "Nothing. I'll head out there." I loaded my pack with the usual: rope, first aid, flares, radio. Added some extra batteries and my big flashlight. Something about Devil's Backbone always made me want more light than I needed. The drive took 40 minutes on winding mountain roads. The closer I got, the quieter everything became. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering. Even my truck engine seemed muffled. I found the student's car right where Jim said it would be. A beat-up Volkswagen van parked at the old mining road entrance. The doors hung open like broken wings. I walked around it, looking for clues. Their camping gear was still packed in back. Food, too. Nobody runs off and leaves food behind, not when they're planning to camp. I found a notebook on the driver's seat filled with neat handwriting about geological survey of abandoned mining operations. Smart kids, too smart maybe. The mining road hadn't been used in decades. Weeds grew up through cracked pavement. Rusty signs warned about dangerous structures and unstable ground, but there were fresh footprints in the mud, 4 sets, all wearing hiking boots. I followed the trail. The deeper I went into the holler, the stranger things felt. The air got colder, which made no sense. It was a warm October day, but here it felt like December. My breath started showing in little puffs. The old mining camp came into view around noon. I stopped dead in my tracks. It looked like someone had frozen it in time. Rusted equipment sat exactly where miners had left it 50 years ago. Lunch pails on stumps. Tools leaning against buildings like their owners just stepped away for a minute. But something was wrong with the scene. Modern camping gear was mixed in with the old stuff. A bright orange sleeping bag draped over a mining cart. A new backpack sitting next to a rotted wooden bucket. And the college kid's footprints led right into the biggest mine shaft. I called out, but my voice seemed to get swallowed by the mountain itself. The echo came back wrong, longer than it should be, like the sound was traveling through spaces that didn't exist. The mine entrance yawned in front of me like a hungry mouth. Support timbers sagged with age. A rusty sign read, "Whitman Mine, authorized personnel only." Below that, someone had scratched 47 souls in the metal. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The tunnel stretched ahead, disappearing into darkness. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. My Lichage Ichtbeam showed old rail tracks, still shiny in places like they'd been used recently. "Hello," I called. "Anyone down here?" This time the echo was worse. It sounded like dozens of voices, calling back, all slightly different from mine. I kept walking. The air got colder with every step. Soon I could see my breath clearly. My radio started crackling with static, then picked up something impossible. Old-fashioned music, the kind they played in the 20s. I stopped to fiddle with the radio. Between bursts of static, I heard a man's voice. "Shift change in 10 minutes. All miners report to Station 3. My blood went cold. I was hearing a radio broadcast from 50 years ago. That's when I found Michael Reeves. He was sitting on an overturned mining cart about 100 yards into the tunnel. At first I thought it was just another college kid waiting for help. But when my light hit him full on, I nearly dropped the flashlight. Michael looked like he'd aged 30 years overnight. His hair had gone completely white. Deep lines carved his face. His hands were black with coal dust that seemed to glow in the flashlight beam. "Michael?" I called softly. He looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much. Been waiting for the shift, boss, he said in a voice that carried a mountain accent he'd never had before. Promised us double pay for working the deep shafts. I knelt down beside him, trying to keep my voice calm. Michael, I'm Ranger Blackthorn. Your professor sent me to find you and your friends. He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Don't know no professor, he said slowly. Been working these mines my whole life. My daddy worked them too, and his daddy before him. But I could see his student ID clipped to his shirt pocket. Michael Reeves, University of Kentucky, Geology Department. The picture showed a young man with brown hair and smooth skin. Nothing like the aged figure sitting in front of me. Where are your friends, Michael? Sarah, Jenny, and David. His face went slack. For a moment, confusion flickered in his eyes. Fev, Ryans? He shook his head hard, like clearing cobwebs. The other miners went deeper, following the new vein. Should have been back by now. That's when I heard it. The sound of pickaxes hitting stone, echoing from deeper in the mine. Rhythmic, steady, like men working hard in the darkness. I helped Michael to his feet. He was stronger than he looked, but his movements were stiff like an old man's. We need to get you out of here, I said. He pulled away from me. Can't leave. Not till the shift's done. Company don't pay for half work. What company, Michael? Whitman Mining Company, of course. He said it like I was stupid for asking. Been working for Mr. Whitman since I was 16. I knew enough local history to know that Whitman Mining Company had gone out of business in 1926, the year of the big accident. The pickaxe sounds got louder, and now I could hear voices too, men talking, laughing, complaining about the heat and the dust. It sounded like a whole crew was working just around the next bend. My radio crackled to life again. This time the voice was clearer. Cave in at Sector 7. All available men respond. Cave in at Sector 7. I grabbed Michael's arm. We're leaving. Now. He tried to resist, but something in my voice must have reached the part of him that was still a college student. He followed me back toward the entrance, stumbling like he was walking in his sleep. Behind us, the voices got more urgent. I heard someone screaming about being trapped, the sound of falling rocks, men calling for help. We ran. I got Michael back to my truck and radioed for a medical helicopter. He kept asking about his shift pay and whether Mr. Whitman would dock him for leaving early. Sometimes, for just a second, he'd look confused and ask where he was. Then the fog would roll back over his mind. While we waited for the chopper, I studied the mine records I kept out in my truck. The Whitman mine had been sealed in November 1926 after what the reports called a catastrophic structural failure. 47 miners died. The company claimed it was an accident, but there'd been rumors of safety violations and rushed work. The helicopter took Michael away, but I couldn't leave. 3 more kids were still in that mine. I called for backup, but the nearest rangers were hours away. By the time they arrived, anything could happen to those students. I loaded up on gear, extra batteries, rope, emergency flares, and went back in. This time, I brought a camera. The mine felt different in the afternoon, colder, more alive. The pickaxe sounds were constant now, coming from every direction. Sometimes I'd see movement in the corner of my eye, shapes flitting between support beams, always just out of my flashlight's reach. I found Sarah Chen about 200 yards deeper than where I'd discovered Michael. She was working a coal face with an ancient pickaxe, swinging it with mechanical precision. Her geology textbooks lay scattered at her feet, pages fluttering in an underground breeze that shouldn't exist. Sarah? She turned, and I saw the same impossible aging that had claimed Michael. Her young face had become weathered and lined. Her hands were black with coal dust. Ma'am, she said politely, touching her forehead like tipping a hat. You shouldn't be down here. This section ain't safe for womenfolk. Sarah, it's Ranger Blackthorn. I'm here to help. She squinted at me in the flashlight beam. Don't know no ranger. You best talk to the shift boss if you got business here. Where's the shift boss? She pointed deeper into the mine. Down in the cathedral, that's where all the decisions get made. I tried to take her arm, but she pulled away. Can't stop working. Mr. Whitman says we got quotas to meet. Company's depending on us. The pickaxe felt real enough in her hands. When she swung it, sparks flew from the coal face. But the coal she was mining crumbled to dust before it hit the ground. I took pictures, though I knew nobody would believe them. That's when I heard David's voice echoing from somewhere deeper in the mine. "Help me! Somebody help me!" Sarah didn't seem to hear it. She kept swinging her pickaxe, humming an old mining song under her breath. I left her there. I had no choice. The tunnel system was bigger than I had expected. Side passages branched off in every direction, and my flashlight beam seemed to get weaker the deeper I went. The voices of working miners followed me everywhere. I found Jenny Martinez in a side chamber, sitting next to a pile of mining equipment that looked like it had been arranged for a museum display. She was reading from a leather-bound ledger by the light of an oil lamp that shouldn't have been able to burn without oxygen. "Jenny?" She looked up with the same aged face as the others. "You need to sign in," she said in a voice that carried the weight of years. "Company rules. Everyone signs in." The ledger was full of names and dates, all from 1926. At the bottom of the page, in fresh ink, were the names of 4 University of Kentucky students. "Jenny, you need to come with me. Your parents are worried sick." She shook her head. "Can't leave till the shift's done. Besides," she lowered her voice to a whisper, "something bad's gonna happen. The miners been talking about it all week. Something about the supports in Sector 7. David's voice came again, more desperate. "The roof's coming down. I can't get out." Jenny closed the ledger with a snap. "See? I told you something bad was going to happen." I grabbed the ledger and stuffed it in my pack. Jenny tried to stop me, but I was bigger and stronger. As soon as the book left her hands, she blinked in confusion. Where am I?" she whispered. "In the Whitman mine. I'm getting you out of here." But as we headed for the entrance, the voices behind us grew angry. I heard men shouting about St. Allen property and company theft. The temperature dropped so fast that ice crystals formed on the tunnel walls. Jenny stumbled, her confusion fading as the mine's influence pulled her back. "I need to return to my station," she said in that aged voice. "Mr. Whitman don't tolerate laziness." We were almost to the entrance when the lights went out. Not just my flashlight, everything. The oil lamps, the strange glow that had been coming from the coal dust, even the dim daylight from the mine entrance. Complete, absolute darkness. And in that darkness, I heard the sound of the mine collapse that had killed 47 men in 1926. The sounds were horrible: creaking timber, falling rock, men screaming in the darkness. I covered Jenny with my body as debris that wasn't there pelted us from above. The mine shook like an earthquake, but nothing actually moved. We were experiencing the memory of a disaster that happened 50 years ago. When the sounds finally stopped, my flashlight flickered back to life. Jenny was unconscious, but breathing. Behind us, deeper in the mine, I could hear David calling for help with real panic in his voice. I couldn't carry Jenny and go after David too, so I did something that still haunts me. I left her near the entrance and went back into the mine alone. The tunnel had changed. Passages that had been there before were gone, replaced by new ones. The mine was reshaping itself, showing me what it wanted me to see. I followed David's voice through twisting corridors until I reached a vast underground chamber I hadn't seen before. My flashlight beam couldn't find the ceiling or the far walls. Somewhere in that space, water dripped like a slow heartbeat. "David! Here! I'm here!" I followed his voice to the center of the chamber, where I found something that made my blood freeze. David was trapped under a pile of rocks that glowed with their own pale light. But he wasn't alone. Dozens of miners sat in a circle around him, their faces pale as moonlight, their eyes black as coal. They wore the clothes they died in: overalls, hard, hats, work boots. Their mining equipment lay across their laps like weapons. At the center of the circle sat a man in a supervisor's uniform. His name tag read J. Whitman, foreman. "Welcome, Ranger," Jeremiah Whitman said without moving his lips. His voice came from everywhere at once. "We've been waiting for you." I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. "These children disturbed our rest," Whitman continued. Came poking around, taking pictures, asking questions about things that should stay buried. "They're just students," I managed to say. "They didn't mean any harm." "Harm?" One of the dead miners laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Company caused plenty of harm. Sealed us in to die when the supports failed. Told the world it was an accident." "That was 50 years ago," I said. "These kids had nothing to do with it." "No," Whitman agreed. "But they're here now, and they've seen too much." The dead miners began to stand. Their movements were wrong, too fluid, like they were floating instead of walking. "We made them part of our crew," Whitman said. "They'll work the mines forever, just like us. Just like you will, Ranger." I felt the mine's influence trying to crawl into my mind. Memories that weren't mine began to surface. Long days in the dark, the taste of coal dust, the ache of muscles worn down by endless labor. But I had something the college kids didn't. I knew these mountains. I knew their history. "You weren't sealed in by accident," I said. "You were murdered." The chamber went dead quiet. "The company knew the supports were bad. They knew Sector 7 was unstable. But they needed to meet their quotas, so they sent you in anyway." Whitman's glowing eyes fixed on me. "What do you know about it?" I pulled out the ledger I'd taken from Jenny. "I know there's evidence. Names, dates, safety reports that were ignored. The truth, though, about what really happened. The truth died with us." "No," I said, opening the ledger to pages I somehow knew I'd find. "It's all here. Written in your own hand, Foreman Whitman. You knew. The mine was dangerous. You tried to warn the company. They ordered you to send the men in anyway." The dead miners began to murmur among themselves. I could feel their anger shifting, turning away from me and toward something else. 50 years you've been trapping innocent people," I continued, "making them pay for crimes they didn't commit. But the real criminals are still out there, living free." Whitman stood slowly. The other miners rose with him. "What are you saying, Ranger?" "I'm saying it's time for justice. Real justice." The dead miners released David and the other students that night. I never understood exactly how. One moment they were aged and confused, trapped in the mine's spell, and the next they were stumbling toward the entrance like people waking from a bad dream. But they were changed. All of them. David's hair had streaks of white. Sarah moved like someone carrying invisible weight. Michael would sometimes stop mid-sentence like he was listening for the sound of distant pickaxes. Jenny kept detailed journals, but never wrote about what happened in the mine. The official report blamed their condition on exposure to toxic gases. The mine was sealed with concrete and declared off-limits permanently. The students recovered enough to finish school, but none of them ever went underground again. As for me, I kept the ledger. And I did some research. The Whitman Mining Company had been owned by 3 partners in 1926. 2 had died years ago, but one family still lived in the area, the Hendersons, who ran a successful construction business in the next county. Old Edgar Henderson was the grandson of one of the mine owners. He'd grown up wealthy on money earned from those dangerous mines. When I showed up at his door with copies of the ledger pages, his face went white as bone. "I don't know nothing about any mines," he said. "Your grandfather did. He knew those mines were death traps, and he sent men to die in them anyway." 3 days later, Edgar Henderson suffered a heart attack in his sleep. The coroner said it was natural causes, but I knew better. I'd felt the presence following me ever since I left the mine. Cold spots in warm rooms, the smell of coal dust where none should be, the sound of footsteps that stopped when I turned around. The dead miners had found their justice. The mine stays quiet now, mostly. Sometimes hikers report strange sounds coming from the sealed entrance, voices singing old work songs, or the distant ring of metal on stone. The Forest Service posts guards to keep people away, but they don't know the real reason why. I know, though. I can feel them down there, resting at last. 47 souls who worked themselves to death in the darkness, finally at peace. But peace doesn't mean gone. Last week, I found coal dust handprints on my ranger station windows. Inside the prints, someone had traced words with their finger. "Thank you." I still patrol that area, making sure nobody else disturbs their rest. It's the least I can do. After all, some debts take longer than a lifetime to pay, and some mountains never forget. My name is Robert Wildwood, and I've been a park ranger at Cumberland Gap for 15 years. People think it's a quiet job, just checking trails and helping lost hikers. They're wrong. The mountains keep their own secrets, and some of those secrets have claws. It was September 1979 when everything changed. The worst drought in 20 years had hit the Appalachians. Springs that had run clear for centuries turned to mud. Animals came down from the high country, desperate for water. That's when the attack started. I remember the morning I got the call. Static crackled through my radio as dispatch told me about the first hiker, found just off the Wilderness Road Trail near the old Cherokee Council grounds. When I hiked up there, I wished I'd stayed home. The victim was a college kid from Kentucky. What was left of him anyway? Deep claw marks ran across his chest, 6 inches long, carved right through his thick jacket. But here's what bothered me. The marks were too clean, too precise, like something with human intelligence had made them. I'd studied big cats for years before becoming a ranger. Mountain lions, bobcats, even worked with tigers at a zoo once. This wasn't random animal fury. This was deliberate. The kid's body faced east, arms spread wide like he was greeting the sunrise. His backpack sat untouched 10 feet away, expensive camera still inside. Whatever killed him wasn't looking for food or territory. It wanted something else. I called in the state wildlife officers and spent the rest of that day looking for tracks. Found them too. Paw prints the size of dinner plates pressed deep into the dry earth. But as I followed the trail up toward the ridge, something strange happened. The paw prints got smaller, then smaller still. By the time I reached the rock outcrop where the trail ended, I was looking at human footprints. Bare human feet. That night I sat and mapped. I cabin writing my report. Kept it simple. Probable mountain lion attack. Victim may have surprised animal while drinking at spring. But as I wrote those words, I remembered something else. The area around the body had smelled wrong. Not just death and blood, but something wild and female, like perfume mixed with musk. I'd grown up in these mountains, bounced between foster homes from Tennessee to Virginia. The old-timers used to tell stories around their wood stoves, tales about things that weren't quite animal, weren't quite human. Cherokee stories about women cursed to walk between two worlds. I'd always figured they were just trying to scare kids. The radio squawked again. Another hiker missing, this time near Daniel Boone's cave. I grabbed my flashlight and headed back into the darkness, telling myself it was just coincidence, just another drought-crazy mountain lion. But deep in my gut, I knew better. The second attack happened 3 days later. Jenny Walsh, a biology student from the University of Tennessee, had been camping alone near the old Pioneer Cemetery. When I found her, she was alive, but barely making sense. It walked on 2 legs, she kept saying, wrapped in my emergency blanket. Like a person, but wrong, all wrong. Jenny had cuts on her arms, the same precise claw marks, but shallow. Like whatever attacked her had been testing her, playing with her. She'd run into the thick woods and hidden in a limestone cave until sunrise. "Tell me exactly what you saw," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her hands shook as she pointed toward the tree line. 8 feet tall, maybe more. Covered in dark fur, but the face... She stopped, took a breath. The face looked like a woman. A beautiful woman with cat eyes that glowed yellow in my flashlight. I drove Jenny to the ranger station and called for medical help. While we waited, she told me the strangest part. "It spoke to me," she whispered. "In another language. Sounded like Cherokee, but I'm not sure. It said something, then just melted back into the shadows like smoke." Ambulance took Jenny away. I hiked back to her campsite. The sun was setting, painting the mountains blood red. Her tent was shredded, but again, nothing stolen. Canned food scattered around, but not eaten. Just arranged. The cans formed a rough circle around a flat stone, and on that stone, scratched deep into the limestone, was a symbol I'd never seen before. Looked like a cat's paw print with human fingers. I took photos, then started following the trail. This time, the tracks were different. Still massive paw prints, but mixed with human footprints, like something was shifting back and forth between forms as it walked. The trail led up toward Pinnacle Rock, through dense forest that seemed too quiet. No birds, no insects, just my boots crunching through dry leaves. The air grew thick and humid, strange for September. My radio started crackling with static, then went dead completely. That's when I heard it. A sound like nothing I'd ever experienced. Part growl, part woman's voice, echoing through the trees from all directions at once. The hair on my neck stood up as I realized I was being watched. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Nothing but trees and shadows. But the feeling remained, like invisible eyes tracking my every move. Then I saw her. 30 feet away, standing in a shaft of moonlight, was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Long black hair, high cheekbones, skin like polished copper. She wore nothing but seemed comfortable in the cool night air. Her eyes caught my flashlight beam and reflected it back like mirrors. Yellow mirrors. "You should not be here," she said, in perfect English, though her voice carried an accent I couldn't place. I fumbled for my radio, but she moved faster than anything human should move. One moment she stood across the clearing, the next she was right beside me, close enough that I could smell teas. That same wild perfume Jenny had mentioned. "The sacred places must be protected," she whispered, and her breath was warm against my ear. "Tell your people to stay away." When I turned my head to look at her, she was gone. But 4 deep scratches marked the tree beside me, still oozing sap. I ran back to my truck and didn't stop until I reached the ranger station. Spent the rest of the night drinking coffee and telling myself it had been a hallucination. Mountain fever, maybe. Or just stress from the attacks. But when I developed the photos the next morning, there she was in the background of one shot. A dark figure watching me from the trees, eyes glowing like twin flames. Word of the attacks spread fast. Local newspapers picked up the story, calling it the Cumberland Gap Cat Killer. Hunters poured into the area, looking for their shot at a record-breaking mountain lion. That's when things got really bad. The first hunting party found more than they bargained for. 3 men from Virginia, all experienced trackers, went into the high country with rifles and dogs. Only one came back. Tom Bradley stumbled into town 2 days later, babbling about a devil cat that had killed his buddies. By the time I got to him, he was sedated at the local clinic, mumbling Cherokee words he claimed the creature had taught him. I organized a search party and found the other 2 hunters. They'd been arranged just like the first victim, bodies facing east, no signs of feeding. But this time was different. This time there was a message. Scratched into a nearby oak tree, 8 feet off the ground, were Cherokee symbols. I couldn't read them, but I knew someone who could. Charlie Swimmer lived in a trailer at the edge of the park boundary. He was 70-something, Cherokee Nation, and one of the few people who still spoke the old language fluently. Most folks left him alone, figured he was just another drunk Indian. They were wrong about that, too. I found Charlie sitting on his porch whittling a piece of cedar. He looked up when my truck pulled into his dirt driveway and nodded like he'd been expecting me. "You come about the Wampus cat," he said before I could speak. I showed him the photos of the tree symbols. His face went pale as old leather. "This says, 'The cursed one protects what was stolen,'" he translated. "And this part here, 'Blood pays for blood.'" Charlie invited me inside his trailer. The walls were covered with old photographs and Cherokee artifacts. He poured strong coffee and told me a story I'll never forget. Her name was Atzilla, he began. Means flower in Cherokee. Beautiful girl, maybe 20 years old, lived with our people 200 years ago. But she fell in love with a white trapper, started telling him our secrets. Where we hid during raids, where our medicine bundles were kept. I listened as Charlie explained how Atzilla's betrayal led to a massacre. Soldiers found the hidden Cherokee village, killed women and children. When the surviving elders discovered what she'd done, they cursed her. Cursed her to be neither human nor animal, Charlie said. To walk on 4 legs by night, 2 legs by day. To guard our sacred places forever, watching for those who would defile them. That's just legend, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Charlie showed me an old photograph, a Cherokee woman from the 1800s with long black hair and distinctive high cheekbones. She looked exactly like the woman I'd seen in the forest. The curse can't be broken, Charlie continued, but sometimes, if the spirits are willing, it can be changed, made less terrible. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside my cabin made me jump. Around midnight I heard something large moving through the woods behind my house. I grabbed my flashlight and looked out the back window. She stood at the edge of the tree line, still in human form, still naked, still beautiful. But now I could see the wrongness Charlie had talked about. Her fingernails were too long, too sharp. Her teeth glinted like ivory knives in the moonlight, and when she moved it was with the fluid grace of a hunting cat. Our eyes met through the glass. She smiled, and I saw sadness there, mixed with something wild and hungry. Then she dropped to all 4s. The transformation was horrible and fascinating. Bones shifted and stretched, muscles rippled and grew, fur sprouted across her skin. In seconds, the beautiful woman became something out of nightmare, 8 feet of pure predator with human intelligence blazing in those yellow eyes. The Wampus cat regarded me for a long moment, then padded silently into the darkness. The state sent in a wildlife specialist with tranquilizer guns and tracking equipment. Dr. Sarah Chen was all business. Short hair, steel-rimmed glasses, clipboard full of scientific explanations for everything. She set up base camp near the original attack site and started mapping movement patterns. Probably a hybrid, she told me on her second day. Mountain lion-bobcat mix, maybe. Genetic abnormality causing unusual size and behavior. I didn't tell her about Atsila. How could I? Instead, I helped her set up trail cameras and motion sensors throughout the area. If the Wampus cat was out there, we'd get proof. The cameras captured plenty. Deer fleeing in terror from something outside the frame. Tree branches shaking for no apparent reason. And in one shot, taken at 3:17 a.m., a glimpse of something large and cat-like moving between the trees. But it was the sound recordings that convinced Dr. Chen we weren't dealing with any normal animal. Mixed in with the typical forest noises were voices. Human voices speaking Cherokee, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. "It's like the forest is haunted," she whispered, staring at the audio readouts. On our 4th night, everything came together. Dr. Chen had insisted on sleeping in a blind near the old Cherokee Council grounds, hoping to get clear footage of whatever was stalking the area. I tried to talk her out of it, but she was determined to solve the mystery with science and reason. I was monitoring her radio from the ranger station when the screaming started. By the time I reached the blind, Dr. Chen was gone. Her equipment lay scattered around the small shelter, cameras smashed, recording devices destroyed. But she was alive. I could hear her calling for help somewhere deeper in the forest. I followed her voice up toward the limestone caves that honeycombed the ridge. The moon was full, turning everything silver and strange. My flashlight beam seemed weak against the shadows that moved between the trees. I found Dr. Chen tied to a tree with what looked like strips of bark. She was unhurt, but terrified, eyes wide as she pointed toward the cave entrance. "She's been talking to me," Dr. Chen whispered. "In English and Cherokee and languages I don't recognize. She says you know about the curse." The Wampus cat emerged from the cave mouth in human form, walking upright but with the fluid grace of a predator. She was no longer the beautiful woman from my first encounter. The curse was stronger now, more visible. Her face was still human, still lovely, but her eyes were pure feline. Her hands ended in retractable claws, and when she smiled, her teeth were sharp as razors. "Robert Wildwood," she said, her voice carrying perfectly in the still air. "You have been watching me, learning about me." "Let her go, Atsila," I said. "Dr. Chen hasn't done anything wrong." The Wampus cat tilted her head like a curious cat. "She brings machines to watch me, metal eyes and metal ears. She seeks to capture me, cage me, study me like an animal in your white man's zoo. She's just trying to understand. I understand perfectly. Atzila's voice rose to a roar that echoed off the cave walls. 200 years I have walked these mountains, protecting what little remains of my people's sacred places, and still they come. Still they dissect, rate, and destroy. She gestured toward the valley below, where I could see the lights of Middlesborough twinkling in the distance. Your roads cut through burial grounds. Your houses sit on medicine wheels. Your tourists pose for pictures beside sacred stones. Her yellow eyes blazed with fury. And you wonder why the cursed one kills? Dr. Chen whimpered, and I took a step forward. There has to be another way, I said. Charlie Swimmer told me the curse could be changed. For the first time, I saw hope flicker in those inhuman eyes. The old man remembers the old ways, she whispered. But the ritual is dangerous. It could kill him. It could kill us all. What ritual? Atzila looked toward the east, where the first hint of dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. A purification ceremony, performed at the place where I was cursed. It cannot break what was done, but it might ease the burden. Allow me to be human during the day, cat only at night. She looked at me intently. But why would you help the monster who has killed your people? I thought about that for a long moment. About the college student, the hunters, all the fear and death. But I also thought about the sadness I'd seen in her eyes, the loneliness of walking between worlds for 2 centuries. Because you're not a monster, I said finally. You're just someone who's been hurt too badly for too long. Charlie Swimmer agreed to perform the ritual, but only at sunrise on the autumn equinox, 3 days away. We spent that time preparing, gathering the herbs and sacred items he would need. Dr. Chen, shaken but fascinated, documented everything with a small camera. This is impossible, she kept saying. People don't just transform into animals. Curses aren't real. But she'd seen Atzila shift from woman to cat and back again. Science was having a hard time explaining that away. The morning of the equinox, we hiked up to the old Cherokee council grounds just as the sun was rising. Atzila was waiting for us in human form, sitting cross-legged on a flat stone that might have been an altar centuries. Go. Charlie began chanting in Cherokee, burning sage and cedar, sprinkling sacred tobacco around the stone circle. The air grew thick with smoke and something else, a feeling like electricity before a thunderstorm. Atzila began to change, but not like before. This transformation was slower, more painful. She cried out as her body shifted between forms, sometimes fully human, sometimes fully cat, sometimes a horrible mixture of both. Charlie's chanting grew louder, more urgent. Blood ran from his nose as he pushed himself beyond safe limits, calling on spirits and powers I couldn't begin to understand. Then, as the sun fully cleared the mountains, everything stopped. Atzila lay on the stone altar in human form, breathing hard but alive. Charlie collapsed, and I caught him before he hit the ground. Is it done? I asked. The old man nodded weakly. She is bound by daylight now, human from sunrise to sunset. But at night, he shrugged. At night, the cat spirit still rules. We helped Atzila down from the altar. She looked different somehow, still beautiful, still marked by the curse, but more peaceful. Thank you, she whispered, and for the first time, her voice sounded completely human. I filed my final report 3 weeks later. Wildlife attacks traced to unusually aggressive mountain lion driven by drought conditions. Animal relocated to remote wilderness area. Case closed. Dr. Chen published a paper about psychological effects of extended wilderness exposure, but never mentioned shape-changing Cherokee women. Sometimes science just can't handle the truth. I transferred to the Cultural Resource Protection Division, officially to help preserve Cherokee historical sites. Unofficially, I became the bridge between 2 worlds. Atzila and I meet sometimes during daylight hours. She tells me about the old days, helps me understand which places are truly sacred and need protection. She's learned to live as a human during the day, though she still moves with predatory grace and her eyes sometimes flash yellow in the sunlight. But at night, when the moon is full and the mountains are dark, I sometimes see those same yellow eyes watching me from the forest edge. The Wampus cat is still out there, still protecting Cherokee lands from those who would harm them. The difference is, now she has help. And sometimes, when I'm alone in my cabin and the wind is howling through the pines, I wonder if I made the right choice, because those eyes in the darkness aren't always friendly anymore. Sometimes they look hungry, but that's a story for another night.